We are excited to have with us today Ashley and Santiago, the COO and CEO of Momentum. We dive into their own story, their AI automation tool for GTM teams, and their passion behind the AI revolution. The GTM AI podcast is sponsored by GTM AI Academy, where we focus on educating GTM professionals on how to use AI as an individual contributors, leaders, or teams, creating business impact over just learning tools. Let's rock and roll. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the GTM AI podcast. I am so excited to have two people who I've come to know over the last 4 or 5 months, I think, something like that. It's been a really good time getting to know them. My company, actually, we just went into a partnership with them a month and a half ago, and I've really enjoyed working with them. So I thought I had to have them on as guests. This is Ashley and Santi of Momentum, and they are the COO and CEO of Momentum, husband-wife combo, right? Pretty cool. And I want to bring them on and pick their brains around GTM and AI and just talk about what you're doing. So ladies first, I'd love to have you introduce yourself, and then we'll go to your hubby.
Yeah, thanks for having us. My name is Ashley Wilson. Like you said, you did a great introduction. I'm co-founder and COO at Momentum.
Love it.
Hey, Santi. I'm Ashley's husband. I'm one of the 3 co-founders. Our third leg in the story, Moise, our CTO, is not on this call. I'm the CEO of Momentum.
Awesome. Love it. So curious, before we jump into some detailed question, I'd love to know more about your background and why and how you kind of got into Momentum in general. Like, what's your background with both go to market and AI specifically? Again, Ashley, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so I got to give credit to kind of Santi and Moise with coming up with the idea for Momentum. I definitely, when Santi told me this concept around kind of automation and Slack first, Slack native, it was middle of the pandemic, 2020. And I got goosebumps on my arms because I'm like, ooh, this could be big. Not knowing, when you start a startup, where it's going to go. And I certainly think that where we are today is not necessarily where we started, but we've kind of built on top of it. But I think we are still kind of in the same core thesis of just leveraging automation to get work done for teams, revenue teams just being the heart of an organization. It's like, us as founders, we're talking and thinking about revenue all day, every day. And I think Slack as well, even 3+ years later since we started the company, Slack is just as important as it was. And I'll add in Teams too. It's like chat as the interface for getting work done is just as important as it was in the middle of the pandemic. And I think that, of course, we hope that will continue to grow. But that's a bit of the Momentum origin story.
I love it. Santi?
Jump in. Yeah, so Ashley and I, of course, were from the very beginning talking about this idea. She only joined it a couple of weeks after we started it. Once we figured out putting all our eggs in the same basket made perfect sense. And it increases the chances of Momentum working out. So we went all in. We really realized the idea for Momentum had legs after meeting a bunch of reps. This is not my first rodeo. I started a couple of companies. So even though I'm a technical founder, usually I was a CTO a couple of times before embarking in Momentum. I've always been involved in the process of go-to-market because when you are 4 people, the CTO is part of sales, as it turns out. And if there was one problem we could identify is that sales tends to be a process and a vertical that is full of small workflows that have no enablement and no tech, that tend to rely on a lot of people. And of course, when the pandemic broke out and people were not in offices anymore, you start lacking the ability to talk to people and pat somebody on the shoulder and ask them a question. So bringing in Slack, and more importantly, trying to bring in automation into the process was really what kickstarted it all. When we saw AI explode a year and a half ago, we knew that it was the perfect complement to what we had been building, and we're lucky enough that was a right decision. The last year has been awesome to be a part of.
I love it. So I know when we first met, I was trying to understand the concept behind it, and the closest thing I could think of was like Zapier, like some sort of automation tool, right? Which is to me, now that I use the tool, it's almost like saying, I wouldn't even put it in the same category as a car, like a Mercedes versus a Honda. It's more like an old Honda versus your speedboat. Totally different category, way better, right? How would you compare the two so someone has a clue of like what does Momentum actually do? How's AI and the automation piece as well? I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up Zapier because I think in the early days of Momentum, that was definitely a more close comparison for us and
Right.
in a way for us to say, hey, it's Zapier for sales or it's Zapier for revenue, in that we're going deep into kind of the revenue process and building automations around that. I think now with AI, that kind of, yeah, like you said, it's just a big paradigm shift. It's almost like you can't even, it's like a different world that we've entered into. And I think that's because we now have the power of, well, we're building on top of OpenAI. So the power to just ingest so much information at once, paired with that is the job of sales day in and day out, is to just do conversations. You and I, how many calls did we have leading up to, you
We
guys
had a
getting
lot.
Momentum? I think I asked Momentum that it was like 10 or 12. And that is just what we're in today when it comes to selling products and us all being remote still. So now I think of the Momentum as we're calling it kind of the extraction mechanism to then do automations or then to push the right information to the right people in Slack. But it's really a layer on top of what you're doing in your process that is
Yeah.
pulling out the insights you need when you need them.
Yeah, I would say the value is so high in getting the right data in real time in the right places for sales. We're talking forecasting. We're talking making sure you never drop a ball with any opportunity that is
Right.
getting work. So getting a Mercedes or a speedboat to implement exactly the right automations and the right data flow is worth it in great dividends. So we decided to build a specialized solution, and it really is a new incarnation of Zapier in the sense that it's automated, but it's a completely new thing when you start talking about how data is extracted and ultimately redirected inside your org.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't when we first did it, and I saw you give the first demo I saw with you, Santi, back in I think it was September, October, whenever that was, a long time ago. But I was just like,
Yeah.
I mean, I was already nerding on AI stuff, but when you added that layer of automation on top of AI, that was just like, this is killer. Just because, in the GTM AI Academy, I talk about how you can use Zapier with some automations, but it's still limited based on the capabilities and the tools and all that kind of stuff, But having one like yours that's like built for GTM function is so nice because then I don't have to teach, quote unquote, either the system or the AI on some of the basics you guys already figured out. You okay if I tell a second about some things we're doing and I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? So just so the listeners know what we're doing, a couple things. So the Momentum right now takes a call from Gong. My team speaks Spanish, Portuguese, and English, mostly Spanish and Portuguese. I do not speak Spanish or Portuguese. And so it gives me a summary in Slack in English of what happened inside those calls. We use Gong. I know Gong does that already, but it does it in the language that is spoken in, which obviously I don't speak. So it's hard for me to understand what's going on in that matter. But with Momentum, you guys integrate with Slack. So I can talk in English and say, what happened in this call that went well? When's the next steps with it? Blah, blah, blah. And then also I can have it respond back in Spanish, which is it's just awesome. Just so you know, I love using that function. Secondly, you take that information from the calls and you automate putting it from the call itself into Salesforce so that it can be automated. And that way a rep is not spending as much time doing the data entry, but more is just editing what's already there and pushing it through so they can get back to talking with customers. And then lastly, one we're excited about tomorrow, we can talk about, I mean, there's more we're using it for, but let's just say this one is the coaching, which I'm so stoked about. And I have told like a lot of people in teasing ways the last few weeks about how this is coming down the pipe and I'm going to be testing it, but I'm really excited to use it for the enablement coaching side of using it to automatically review and score calls, not only for the rep, but for me as an enabler and for the manager to get a review of what's going well, what they need to work on, and have that summary. Because right now, from an enablement point of view, coaching is one of the biggest pain points for most teams, managers or enablement. But it's one of the places that I feel like are most impactful as far as performance. So curious. I have to say all this to say, number one, freaking love the tool. Number two is when you come up to use cases like this, there's so many things to be automated. How do you decide like where do you put in the automation or where do you put in AI to make sure it's like actually going to be impactful for a go-to-market team? Does that make sense, hopefully? And again, ladies,
Yeah.
or Santi, where do you want? I don't care.
You can start something.
We have a pretty particular philosophy when deciding how to build momentum. And I think it's like it's a differentiator at the very least between other products in the space. I think most products in the sales tech space today have been built in a philosophy of being a product, needing to be used by a person to deliver value. And over 3.5 years trying to build momentum, we realized that it's hard to become part of the workflow. It's hard to be a product, that 6 or 7 tab that the reps open in their browser and have to remember to engage with to get their job done every day. So when we decide and ponder how much automation, how to streamline things versus, how much to do interactions with the end user, we want to provide the ability to go all the way every time. We understand that in the real world, you have to be flexible and come back to engaging with the user. And when we do that, we try to do it with very low friction means, like chatting in Slack or clicking a button that gets delivered to you. So you don't have to go remember to open, the Momentum tab today. But we do still live by the philosophy of full automation. So when we do go with teams that have dozens of reps, sometimes hundreds, and sometimes many hundreds, they can decide to make these mechanisms happen automatically. So in your case of coaching, there's so much of the challenge of coaching is the fact that managers don't have the time or don't know what call to identify to invest the time to do coaching. If we can put AI has all the time in the world and it's quite reliable. So if we can run it as automatically as possible to both identify and deliver the initial insights, then it's on the manager to then decide the final 20% of effort where they want to allocate it.
No, I love that. Anyone to add, Ashley?
Yeah, I was going to add too. I think that there's, kind of a blessing and a curse, and we're leveraging it more as a blessing to be kind of a Swiss Army knife, which Momentum kind of is. And that was one of our, just in terms of starting the company in the early days, it's challenging to go to market with a Swiss Army knife because you're like, we could build anything. And they're like, great, what can you build? And like, okay. So we've had to kind of figure out how to kind of productize a lot of these use cases to get you in the door. Like you got in the door because you saw summaries. And you're like, whoa, these summaries are just showing up in Slack. Okay, I get that. Oh, you do that. Now that you're in, you're like, oh, could Momentum do this and that? And now we're even with, the coaching module, we're basically giving you a framework to do the automations that you want to do. But I know that 10 other customers may want to do a slightly different version of the coaching, or they may not want to do coaching at all, but they want to deliver a different type of summary to their CEO every Monday morning. So that's something that we've had to learn and also take into account that when it comes to just revenue teams and process, everyone has their own variation. Like the two constants are like, okay, Slack, you're probably recording calls, and Salesforce. That's what we know today. Beyond
that's the
standard. From there, we kind of have to, how do you build for all the market you want to go after? And that's where we've had to, be strategic about how we build and what we deliver.
Well, then, with all the changes happening, I'll start with you, Santi, with two questions in one. One is, in the near future, what do you see Momentum specifically being capable of as a result of the advances in AI? And then two, what do you see as in general for the market of AI in the next 1 to 2 years?
For Momentum, I would say the next big breakthrough will be on our ability to give you answers from aggregates of interactions, not just calls, it could be emails too, but not just a couple dozen, we're talking hundreds, if not thousands of calls getting analyzed. A big part of our effort and a big part of our value will come from Momentum's ability to understand this huge data set in the context of sales. It's so common that I talk to a CRO that tells me, Santi, what I want is give me the top 3 objections we've seen in the last 30 days in my business. And we're talking about CROs that have teams of 1,500 sales reps. Thousands and thousands of calls are happening every week. And what you're asking me is, what are the 3 top objections? Well, we can pull that out. We can ingest that data. And there are mechanisms through which we can reliably answer those questions. They're sophisticated. They're taking time for us to build, but that's where we're going. And at that point, the flow of data into the CRM, which is what we're selling today, is incredible. But it is something that more or less with humans, you can figure out. Like you can put people to do the work anyways.
Right.
The idea that you could tap into thousands of calls and extract the classic questions that a head of sales would have, like the most common objections, who's the best one at handling those? How are
Right.
we pitching this product? How are we pricing it? Are we failing to deliver on this specific value prop? I think it's just a whole new type of value that leaders in larger organizations in particular are just I've never seen before. So they're going to be excited about. Now, where's AI? The second part of your question, how is AI going to come
Yeah.
into the market in the next year? I think it's been, from what I see out there, there's been a lot of focus put into AI to build top of funnel. SDR seem to be the area that everybody quickly identified could be enhanced, and we're certainly doing a fair amount of that, and we're very happy with it today. I think that is like a first order. You need very little knowledge about a customer to put together good AI outreach. Most of the knowledge is public, so you already have it. I think the next kind of phases of AI taking over go to market will start going after areas in which we have new knowledge, where we met customers before, not just this week, but maybe 3 years ago. And maybe that
Right.
was a close lost. So I think there's a lot of potentially being able to do mass email campaigns that pick up on past interactions you ever had with a company and use that to put together engaging interactions. To me, it's almost like customer 365 or
Yeah.
customer 360, but really coming to reality because this new customer 360 can ingest unstructured data in a way that it never could before and can ultimately deliver on new leads, better close deals, happier customers. That's my bet for 2024.
That's amazing. Actually, before you go, I have one thing to follow up with you, what you said, Santi. What I find in the past is before places like Gong existed, like you had these, Zoom would have recordings, but you have this library of stuff you couldn't have any access to, no data, no nothing. Then Gong, Salesloft, Chorus, like all these different places came up with conversation intelligence capabilities, right? So then you have the ability to be able to share across your team and have access to all the calls happening once, which is major value. But then like the next step is like questions I've asked several CI tools saying, I want to know what questions are being asked all the time by everybody. What's the most important? Who's the one responding to it correctly? How can I train that right? And then to your point, it's not only identifying that, but automating it to where I can send that to the Slack channel of all sales saying, hey, here's the top 3 objections and here's how you respond to them every single week. Bam, all the time. That to me is like, for me in enablement, I see that enablement is going to turn more into an orchestrator of the ecosystem than the person actually doing it. Does that make sense? And that's what I see with AI tools is having that ability of automating things and I'm overseeing it versus I'm coaching on every single call, because it's just not, I can't scale that. So actually, sorry, I'll let you
Enablement
answer.
is, I'll bounce it back for a second. I'll say
Yeah.
enablement and operations, sales enablement and sales operations are so chronically understaffed. And what
Yeah.
you're talking about is immense workloads, especially as an org grows. So being able to reliably execute these intelligent workloads
Mhm.
at scale and always deliver, it's something the world has never seen. Because with humans, you just couldn't pull it off unless you had, a sales enablement organization that was overstaffed,
Massive,
which by the way, I've
massive.
never heard of.
Yeah. Never happens. Actually, go ahead. Your turn. What do you see for momentum and then AI in general for the GTM market?
Yeah, I think, if I look at kind of what's happened this past year plus since kind of we started working on our stuff, but then also, of course, ChatGPT came on the scene. It's hard to know, like, did our appetite for watching Gong calls I mean, the collective kind of
All
people
of us.
in revenue,
Yeah.
all of us, like, did we collectively decide that we don't have time for that because we got busier? Did we decide that because now we see that the AI can do it, like AI tools can do it for us? So we decide it's not worth our time? Are we just like, our attention spans are actually getting shorter year by year?
Right.
Either way, that's where I think is really interesting that we've gone so rapidly from something that even a year ago, like watch a lot of calls and you're like, wow, it's so great we have calls, to 1 year later being like, I
Right.
will never watch calls. I want it in Slack. I want it fast. I want it delivered real time. And so I think for momentum, we're just picking up on that of people are, for whatever the reason is, wanting the information delivered to them specific and catered to what they are actually looking for. Like cut out all the extraneous stuff, I'm
stuff.
focused on what I need to do. Give me what I need to see, and then I'm going to move on. And I think that's why I say, like, I see momentum as this layer on top of a lot of these other tools, or a layer on top of your process, to say, okay, great. We now have the tech to do that, to give you what you need to see. So I think this year we'll definitely keep kind of like you came in with this coaching use case. We'll keep kind of hearing about these use cases and saying, like, great, let's automate it. Let's apply AI to it. And I think in like the next couple of years, of course we share the same vision because we work at the same company, but it is interesting to think about this new way of looking at the CRM, where Salesforce is the database still, but it's a database. It's not giving you kind of that qualitative view, that full picture view. And I think in that world, you need something that's much more real time, easy to interact with. Anyone should be able to go find the information that they need without like going opportunity to opportunity, or having your RevOps person build a report, or I don't know what the exact form is over the next few years, but I think as an industry, we'll move towards that view of, I guess the customer 360. That was, who coined that? Salesforce? Like maybe they tried to do it before. Now we're maybe going to actually get there.
Maybe we'll get there. Yeah, I've thought about that too. Like, how did we get to the point to where, we were so excited to be connected to the internet after it dialed for 30 seconds. You finally got access to the internet back in the day, to now like being 10 seconds. You kidding me? Come on. And now it's like with this stuff.
Generation. Scroll.
It's the same thing. I think it's because like, I remember when I first had my first CI tool, it was awesome. Then I thought, oh my gosh, I have hundreds of calls I got to do. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, it was a reality of me having to do this thing now because I have this access to, I also think it's partly to do other market trends to like Amazon Prime and other stuff that people just are used to. And now you expect that everywhere, But to your point, with you guys are doing, I think it's awesome. Okay, random question, not about momentum, about AI specifically. I talked to some people they say things like, and there's good reason for this, but they say things like, I feel like using AI is cheating, or I can't trust AI, or how do I know it's safe to trust AI to do things like coaching and know that it's going to be accurate? Like, all that kind of doubt mindset, right? I think it's totally okay to be able to be critical and doubtful and understand really how effective it is, because you don't know how good it is unless you really pinpoint and say, hey, is this actually good or not? So to those people, because you are, both in the AI world, what do you say to people who have concerns around safety or cheating or any of that kind of thought process? What would you say? And Santi, I'll start with you again.
I'm sure. So from my side, my answer is AI is just another tool. All technology is always tools, right? We started when the car came out, people rode horses and they thought that cars, were cheating. And then over time, they become the way that job gets done. I don't think it means you replace people. Hopefully, most of your audience's jobs are serious enough that people cannot fully be eliminated from the process, but they can certainly be improved and become more effective by leveraging higher order tools that assist them. So in my world, when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, how many things can I use this for? And we are redlining contracts with it, and we are putting together job offers, and we are writing internal messages to announce new employees. And doesn't mean that I don't do the job. I always review it and I'm always reading it, but something that could perhaps take me 2 days to load by lawyers, bounce back, would cost me thousands of dollars. And today take me half an hour and only maybe requires a very quick interaction with a lawyer and a lot more interactions with, ChatGPT. The world of sales is the same. Sales is a yield-based organization. If a rep can take 14 calls a day instead of 10 calls a day, that rep's going to close more quota. So it's going to do better if they can effectively get it done. So taking advantage of AI, both at the individual level as well as the org level, to me is an absolute mandate. If you're fearful of it, get out of the way, because there's more companies coming behind you and they are not shy of taking advantage of the new tech to outperform.
Yeah, I agree, man. I love it.
Ashley, we think about our product in particular. We're definitely mindful of, as you start to sell this tech more and more, people rely on it more and more. So there is a responsibility. I'm sure OpenAI feels this, to the millionth degree of like thinking how many people are building on that, and then the funneling down to how we're consuming information, and like
Right.
that information gets in our brain and we believe it or not. So there is a responsibility. That's where I think we're adding in things like, hey, upload your coaching framework. Like instead of just saying, here's the call transcript that we're going off of, or the emails or the Salesforce activity, like let's also take a more holistic view of how you coach, what your frameworks are, what your personas are, and I think that those things all like go into training it to, it's probably not foolproof, but it's going to be a more accurate reflection of your business, which I think will give you better answers, will give you more trust. And then over time, you start to trust it. You use it more, it feeds more data into the system. And I think, in a few years, like I agree with Santi, like we won't imagine a world without it. And we also won't be living in a world without it. It will be so integrated, but it's going to take time to get there. So that's certainly one thing we're kind of keeping in mind, that, especially as you get more and more folks involved, or someone in your position where you're bringing a tool like Momentum in and reps are just going to start consuming it, or leaders, you also have that responsibility too. So I think that there's just making sure that the training is there, and that we're being mindful of that this is still a work in progress, space,
Right.
industry.
Yeah. And one of the examples I showed you when we talked about coaching initially, when I had my rep. So for the listeners, I had a Momentum through AI grade, quote unquote, a call. And that was without any training of the AI on the particular call with our personas, our stuff. But the call was in Spanish. It gave me the review in English. And then I had the rep who speaks English, fortunately, review both the goods, the strengths, and the weaknesses. And he's like, this is 90% correct. I'm like, we haven't done anything except for point the AI out of. So I know that now when we customize it, it's going to be really focused on the competencies, the persona, the stage of the deal cycle, like all that stuff is going to be really more specific, which goes to the point of, to me, usually people who think they're cheating or it's unsafe or something don't quite understand AI. So it needs a little bit of education for the brains, the human mind, because it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing to think about, this new world of like, how the world should do this. And then you also need training for the AI itself to make sure it is, like you said, in context of what's happening. So it's not delivering some random thing. You're like, where in the world did that come from? So I think it's super smart. All right. Lastly, my last question for you is that momentum.io is a website. So anyone wants to go there, please go there. I'm a huge proponent of these two and just the company in general. But any last thoughts around AI momentum you want to share before we let you go? Ashley, you first this time.
I feel like I'm sure anyone building in this space, and certainly any founder, it's like, it's your baby. You love your baby. You think your baby's the most beautiful baby in the world.
Right.
So try to kind of keep that bias out. But I do feel like it's just an exciting time to be building in this because it's so new. It's really changing things. I'm sure people who are building mobile apps, 15 years ago, were feeling the same. Like we're kind of on the cusp of this next wave, and it's going to be interesting how it will shake out. But I think, to your point, if you're not jumping on it now, you should. If you haven't accepted that this will change things, you should. Like I can understand kind of the skepticism we felt this past year, but I think as we're going into 2024, like the train has left the station and it's not slowing down. So you might as well just kind of get on and start to adapt to this new reality. And I think in 5 years, 10 years, the world's going to look very different, but in a good way, in an exciting way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. What do you think, Santi?
I got it. You can tell we're married because I was thinking about 80% of what Ashley just shared. I have a slightly different flavor of it, but yeah, the same kind of share and convey the same level of excitement that I'm feeling for the space. It's not often that you get to see a disruption, a technology that can come out and deliver orders and multiples output and improvements both at the business level and at the individual level for the consumer. It's really fun to see it, and it's just so dynamic right now. It's changing literally every week. A new piece is coming out. So for those that feel a little overwhelmed by it, I would say just get your hands on some of these products, go interact with ChatGPT a couple of times, and you will feel it yourself. Is very accessible. Perhaps counter to many other technologies from the past, like crypto, where maybe installing a wallet and buying your first token took 3.5 weeks of following YouTube tutorials. In the world of AI, you just got to go to chat.openai.com or open.ai, I forget, and have an interaction with ChatGPT to understand what this is, but get excited and embrace the trend. It's for your benefit. We're talking about more productivity, perhaps hopefully a more fun day-to-day where the chores can be delegated to a magical assistant that won't really charge you for it, that can be just put on pause or can run without a break. So to me, it's exciting. And of course, for the entrepreneurs, oh my God, where are you waiting? Jump onto this trend. It's really cool to go to the future right now and get to have that privilege very often.
I love it. You too. Thank you. I always enjoyed conversations with you too, but I just want to say thank you for taking the time. For both of you, got the superpowers of momentum here with me, and I know Moise is listening, so we have the trinity of superpowers. It's like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman there. So we're missing Batman. But thank you to both for joining me. And again, if you want to go see their stuff, momentum.io. And yeah, they'll happy to talk to you anytime. Thank you all.
Thank you.
John. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the GTM AI podcast. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, and come back for more.